The Book of Remembrance of Enoch, Chapter 8. The Tablet of Badal, reference number 110. Division, the story of Enoch and Edney. A record written upon stone tablets by the hand of Enoch, the seventh from Yaatsekawd. Written to establish a Yod, reference number 111. Yod, number 3027, the ancient and original name of the church, and a holy city in his day, and for a long distance generation of the holy people who shall be present when the great Holy One shall come forth from his habitation. And his arms shall be made bare before the eyes of all people, written so that they may know how to rightly divide upon the earth and in heaven, and in this way preserve a heritage of loving kindness for Anokeesed in creation. Enoch, scribe of righteousness, inscribed upon stone tablets great words for the Most High, and the power of his Spirit established heavenly tablets that can speak to the family of man through the ages. Thus stones out of obscurity are speaking great and wondrous things unto all the hearts of the penitent who read these things. Therefore learn and understand the mysteries contained herein. And it came to pass in the 24th year of Enoch that he wrote all that he beheld concerning that which was written on the tablet of Seth, as he viewed our first parents Yatsekawd and Chavah, reference number 112. Seth, chapter 4, verse 13. Now Enoch lived during the first great sorrow of Anokeesed, for the earth was fresh and new, and yet it was filled with violence and sorrow, and wickedness and vengeance abounded. And it seemed that the wicked would express their dominion and overtake all the purposes of Anokeesed in creation, and all the souls of the earth were in commotion. And as I looked with Urim, I saw plainly that all of the families of those ancient times had severe contrast between righteousness and wickedness among their children. For Yaatsekawd and Chavah, being very holy and righteous, had children who were murderers and vile sorcerers. And they also had holy and good children who had great authority in their righteous standing before Anokeesed and the Yaatsekawd. And it was the same with Matteniah and Barakah, for they had children in the land of Toah. Yea, even wicked parents had children who turned toward righteousness and led holy lives. And it is known that Kenneh and Awan had children who fled from the land of Heliah to join with the people of Enoch. And it can be seen that from the beginning there became a complete separation between the righteous and the wicked. And in every family there was division. And among the wicked there was hot anger and much fear. And among the righteous there was great sorrow and times of joy. And all the creations of Anokeesed were as though they were turned upside down. And it came to pass that I beheld Enoch looking with Urim in the place called Amara. And I saw Motsah the Lamb appear to him in his view in the Urim. And the Lord is instructing him concerning all things with regard to man upon the earth. And I see and hear that our kind Motsah loves Enoch and has compassion upon him, and he is urgent to instruct him. And the Lord said, Herein lies a great mystery. Listen and learn how the personalities of the sons of heaven were formed, and took upon themselves their individual natures. And again the Lord said, Since the moment of the first sin, all creation upon the earth has entered into a process of moving away from the natural state in which it was created in Elda, and it began to move steadily toward becoming temporal. And you know that I have shown you that when your first parents sinned, the elements of creation, including their own bodies, began to follow with them to become temporal, and even I myself began to become temporal with them. And you have seen that starting with the dust that came upon the righteous garments of Chavah, along with the feeling that she felt unclean when she arose from partaking of the tree, the elements of the earth proceeded with this process of transformation, and it has continued until even now as we speak. And it happened this way because to the great Holy One all things are spiritual, and anything that moves to depart away from his nature must be transformed into the temporal, and when they return to him, they must be transformed back again. And it is the greatest desire of my heart that you should comprehend these things, because man is the object of creation. The temporal nature of all the spirits of the living souls in creation took upon themselves the temporal nature of man, with both the righteous and the wicked. And they did this as man was first becoming temporal, and the two extremes that you know in each family of the earth are reflected in the souls of creation, even according to the way that each of the sons of heaven have chosen. So it is well to understand that the nature of the agency of man is in relation to the desires of Anokeesed, and in all things they chose continually, whether to be like him in his loving kindness or not. But the nature of the agency of all the souls in creation among the sons of heaven is only in relation to man, whether they will follow after that man or this one. Or that is to say, that people decide things concerning if they are willing to abide by the desires and nature of Anokeesed. But the watchers of heaven use their agency to decide things concerning the desires and nature of man, as to whether they will follow the one extreme or the other, as pertaining to either righteousness or wickedness. And it is the nature of that which issues forth from the love of the Father, that every soul is given to decide between right and wrong. And this is so whether it be man or the other souls in creation, for all the watchers of heaven also know right from wrong. And you now stand in the 7th generation since your parents left Eden, and you have seen that in each family of the earth since the beginning there has been sharp contrast between righteousness and wickedness in their lives and in the lives of their children. And with each person in each succeeding generation, my Father has had a new reason to create the earth, and this is because of oneness. And the sons of heaven have chosen their way anew with each generation in each family, and accordingly some of the watchers have fallen and chosen the evil example of man at the bidding of Motsah the decadent. And some have been faithful to their vision of created purpose, and they have chosen the example of the righteous, and also righteous and wicked men influence the choosings of the sons of heaven. And it is in this way that the nature of all of the spirits of life on the earth have taken upon themselves the nature of their beings, and their personalities are formed after this manner. And know, my son, that with the contrast between Lamech and yourself, as seen by that which you each have taken into your bosoms, and by the instructions of both the righteous and the wicked, the choosings of all the watchers have become complete, insomuch that now, in this generation, they have settled themselves in their choosings, according to the righteousness which your mother Chavah performed at the rock of Ariel. And Motsah the Lamb chose to honor that which she was inspired to perform, and he established it among all the sons of heaven. But the fallen ones, in their ignorance, have given the matter no heed. And now, because of this, their way is surely set, and the nature of all of their activities and desires and influences and longings, and that which they find delight in, are complete in their definitions, and all of their determinations have been made and have become fixed, because Motsah established the righteousness of 70 among them also. And herein lies a great mystery. All of the righteousness that is built into creation is and will be throughout all the course of the earth, after the exact manner and the very nature of the pattern of the righteousness in these first 7 generations, starting with Yaatsekawd and Chavah. And it will endure to be so during all the course of man, and it will be the only definition of righteousness. The Deshoy will recognize easily as being utterly pure and a part of their souls. And also the wickedness that is built into the fallen spirits in creation is and will be after the very nature and likeness of the wicked during these first 7 generations, starting with Kenneh and Awan. And this also will endure in the exact likeness of it, all through the course of the earth until wickedness is done away. And I tell you now, little son, that we call the wicked elements of the earth the Darkar Darchoy, because they have fallen into decay, together with their leader, Motsah the decadent, and all the holy watchers we call the Yaatsekawd, because they have eternally chosen the pathway of righteousness, and they have eyes to see Anokeesed. And righteousness or wickedness by definition will remain within the boundaries of the natures and desires of the specific individuals of these first 7 generations of man, and there will be no other righteousness, and there will be no other wickedness during all the course of the earth, for all of their ways are set in this first great sevening. Reference number 113. This sevening was when all the watchers chose in relation to man. Shabuah is when Shem had the Yaatsekawd choose in relation to Motsah the Lamb. And thus are the sons of heaven divided in every generation before the eyes of all men who live upon the earth. And I now say to all those who live during the tribulation times, the mystery of how to behold and how to put to use the arm of the Lord is thus revealed to you. For when the Yaatsekawd recognize someone as righteous, according to the definition that is in them, then the presence of the Prince of Righteousness, who is Motsah the Lamb, and the comprehension of all that he does in his holiness, is able to flow freely into the hearts of the godly, and it is able to be seen by their eyes and heard in their souls. And when the Yaatsekawd recognize someone as being wicked, according to the definition that is in them, then by their support and instruction, the beasts of the earth shall arise, and the nature of their chosen way is also able to flow into their souls to bring death and avarice. For this reason, it is urgent upon all those who would be holy, who can be blessed enough to know the nature of the righteous in the first great sevening, to follow dutifully and diligently their example in righteousness. For surely I say unto you that rich blessings will flow to spare the righteous from evil. For all the watchers of holiness can recognize and protect one of their own. And evil is quite sufficient to deal with those who are filled with the lusts of the world. And great shall be the sorrow and dismay of the wicked, and calamity shall follow upon calamity, and it shall pursue them. Therefore it is expedient upon the righteous of the last day that they give careful heed to pattern their righteousness after that of these first 7 generations. And the Lord ended his speaking to Enoch before the Urim. And it came to pass that Enoch lay upon the ground at Emara, astonished and overcome in his joys to learn of the first great sevening. And he pondered greatly on what it could mean that he should do for the Lord. And when he returned home, it was some days before he could speak of the wonders that he had seen and heard. And from that day he moved with determination, even as a man who knows his way and does not stumble over obstacles. And it came to pass that Baraka was troubled, that perhaps Enoch would forget some of that which he beheld before the Urim. And she came gently to him, and she said, Enoch, my son, would it please the Lord if you had present with you, when you stand before the Urim, a company of trained listeners? Would you not inquire of the Lord concerning this matter? And Enoch respected the wishes of his mother, for it was she who had performed the righteous prayers over the Urim. And it came to pass after those days, Enoch determined that he would leave Anokeesed for a few days, and take his journey toward the hill country in the east. And as he prepared, he felt the urgings of the Lord that he should take the Urim. And it came to pass that he journeyed east for some days, and toward evening he approached a cavity in a rock, for to stay the night, and he knew it not, but it was the cavity in a rock where Yatsekawd and Chavah dwelt when they sinned. And it came to pass that when evening was fully come, and the sun was going down, great signs in the heavens presented themselves to him, and the bright redness of the sunset was in the east, and the lights of evening appeared, as if the sun was going down on that side. And Enoch marveled at the sight of it, and he wondered what it meant. And behold, when he arose in the morning, the redness of a bright sunrise was to be seen in the west, and the sky was gray in the east. And again Enoch wist not what it meant. And he got himself upon a high place to see this great sight. And he said aloud, Lord, what is the meaning of these signs in the heavens? And the Lord spoke to him and said, Look and see, for are not the signs in the heavens like tongues of fire? Reference number 114, an invitation to use the Urim. And it came to pass that Enoch placed his staff in the earth upon the high place, and the morning sun shone brightly upon him, and it was the field where Motsah the lamb had prepared the skins of the sheep for clothing. And as he looked, he began to see, and he saw Motsah the lamb bid all the sons of heaven to come to counsel with him and his father. And the call went out upon the earth. And it came to pass that Enoch beheld the spirits of the sons of heaven coming to the place of his bidding. And Enoch saw that many would not. And after a while Anokeesed said to his son, Let us number all those among the sons of heaven who have come to our council. And it was found that 1/3 of the watchers of heaven, reference number 115, the original 1/3, 2/3 division, Enoch was actually present at this council in heaven, would not come to council together at the bidding of Motsah the Lamb. And Anokeesed grieved in his heart, and the day of his sorrow was magnified. And when all who would come were assembled, Anokeesed stood and he said, O woe is me! What shall we do to safeguard the handiwork of my loving kindness in the earth? Seeing so many have gone to follow after corruptions and uncleanness, how shall we intervene to see? Reference number 116. God saw the original reason to establish the church to be intervention against corruption and uncleanness, that all of the purposes of creation are protected and preserved. And all heaven was silent, and quiet tears were seen to flow because of the sorrow of Anokeesed. And it came to pass that after a while, Shabbathiel stepped forward, and she said, It seems to me that we must establish Yod, for such an establishment would allow the righteous to come together often, and join in their spirits to be edified and nourished and healed and supported and ministered to and covered with a cloud of protection. And they will find rich fellowship one with another. And Ebedel said, It is surely so. And they could consecrate their lives to him and all that is in their dominion by the power that Yod can bring, because they are joined in always remembering Anokeesed and Motsah the Lamb. And Sarahiel said, And they could draw with strength all who waver to be led astray. And they all together would love them with much power. And Parnell said, And they can be brought to know Anokeesed from the days of their childhood, for Yod can bring to their souls an awareness of his presence, insomuch that they can see his face. And when they all had come to present their views before Anokeesed, Motsah the Lamb stepped forward and he said, My father, may I speak? And Anokeesed replied, Say on, my son. And Motsah said, With the establishment of Yod, the holy sons of heaven, and all of the righteous among men in succeeding generations can so order their lives together as to have great authority over evil. And they can make determinations to direct their families in such a manner as to rightly divide between the powers that are upon the earth, and by diligence and long-suffering, the Yod that we may establish can so affect the righteous that they will love one another, and be persistent and understanding in their pursuit of repentance, and in this way the handiwork of your loving kindness may be preserved from generation to generation. And when Motsah was done speaking, Anokeesed asked, Among whom shall we establish Yod? And all of the Kodashoi said together with one voice, Please, O Father, establish it among us also, for we desire to be in rich fellowship with your lovely ones in Yod, and we desire to care for them and heed all their bidding, and the tumult of their joy in their speaking was like the roaring of the sea. And Anokeesed answered the Kodashoi, and he said, Will you order your lives in such a way that you will either give of yourself or withhold yourselves, according to the needs of the people of Yod? And they answered, We will do this as you have said, so that you will have support for those who love you. And it came to pass that when all was quiet again, Debariel spoke up, and she said, How shall we identify among men those who will act in such a way as to be joined with the Yod that we shall establish. And Ebedel answered, and it was the very rock of Ariel upon which Yatsekawd and Chavah first found the joys in their forgiveness. And she said, let our Yod be only composed of those who are founded upon the rock of repentance, of whom Motsah the Lamb bears witness. And this shall be the foundation of our Yod all through the course of man. And Emethiel exclaimed, yes, indeed. Let it be so, and great shall be the Yod that we shall establish. For it shall be the very means that will allow the great Holy One to extend the desires of his heart among his children, and it will be the way he expresses his great name in the midst of his loved ones. And Regel said, shall the Yod that we shall establish fight against evil, to stand boldly against it? And Anahiel replied, it must not be so, but they must only pursue holiness and goodness with a longing for the truth. For evil is sufficient to attain levels of corruption, that it will in the end fight against itself. And Motsah said before his father, the visions of holiness that is resident in all of the watchers that are assembled here at this council shall be the law of Yod. And the law shall determine the entry of every person into the Yod that we shall establish. And it shall be determined by whether they walk in diligence to carefully seek out my voice to them, and act faithfully according to that which they receive. And at these sayings all heaven was sober, and willing to set about the work at hand to establish Yod. And it came to pass that in the midst of all that was being spoken, in the discussions afterward, Anokeesed spoke, and he said, what shall be the way that we shall identify the works of those among men who shall be a part of the Yod that we shall establish? How shall we know them to set them apart? For it seems to me that they shall be known for extending the hands of loving kindness to men and to all of the watchers of holiness. Therefore let us identify them in the midst of creation that act in my behalf in loving kindness. And Motsah the Lamb said, Father, your hands are always extended in loving kindness. And you see, you have yellow bands of color on your sleeve openings. Therefore, those of our Yod will do the same with their garments, as a constant reminder to always extend their hands in loving kindness. And this is so even if they must rescue their loved ones from evil, for it is not an act of loving kindness to deliver your loved ones out of harm. And because they do works like their Father in heaven, all the Kodesh will be obedient to honor and support all that those of the Yod consecrate, and uphold all to whom they apply their ministry, and they shall be diligent to be called into service, to see that all truth is brought unto remembrance. And it came to pass that all of heaven was astir at the prospect of the establishment of Yod, and thus the council was ended, and the 1/3 who would not come began to inquire as to that which had been determined in the council, and all the Kodesh held their peace, and did not utter any word of it before them. And the fallen ones were angry that they could not know of these things. And they went abroad and spoke ill of the Kodesh, and mocked the council of Anokeesed. And it came to pass that Motsah the Lamb put his hands upon the head of Enoch, and his hair was down. And he said, Little son, you are charged with establishing Yod for all of the righteous, and by it they may walk in perfection of way, in the example of your old father Yatsekawd and his rib. And you are to establish the righteous ways of the people in all of their times, and for their passages with my father, and according to their needs, and all of the meaning of it. And all of the righteous must be diligent to be clean before me, and to be clean is to choose to know me in the elements of the earth, and to reject the Darchoi, who do not come to the council in heaven, for their ways are emptiness and death. And you are to diligently instruct all of the righteous to walk in the way of Anokeesed, in the power of godliness, and to depart away from walking in the ways of the wicked, who mingle with the fallen ones. And you shall plainly teach all of the righteous during the course of the earth to rightly divide between the ways of Yod and the ways of the wicked. And you are to write the manner in which this division may be understood upon a stone, and I will see to it that the stone is brought to the righteous in the end of days. And you shall establish Yod for the first generation and for the last. And it shall flow with the many delights of pure water. But the wicked will inherit the valleys of Haliah, with all the filthy waters that shall flow there, both now in the beginning and in the end of days. And I have instructed all the Kodesh to help you and come to your aid, and I will enlighten you along the way, and we shall empower you in this task. So be not afraid, my son, and go in peace to perform all that I have asked of you. Amen. And it came to pass that as I looked with Urim, I knew that the original definition of righteousness is still resident in the souls of the Kodesh, and it remains firmly affixed in the righteousness of our old parents, Yaatsekawd and Chavah, together with their children who were righteous. And the token of the covenant Motsah the Lamb made with Gabriel is before us to guide us in the way, and it is the urgent task of all of the righteous in the end of days to diligently follow after the righteous example of the first 7 generations before the flood. And it is expedient that we achieve a level of holiness that we cannot anticipate evil. And by this, in the end, we will inherit the dominion that Anokeesed gave to his children, and that inheritance will result in wickedness being done away, and the true knowledge of this, while it is written in the weakness of human words in this record, it is certainly written with clarity and perfection into all of the souls of the Kodesh, and it can be found there by those who humbly seek after a knowledge of it. And this came to us from the Kodesh because they follow to this day the exact tenure of the righteous nature of the first 7 generations, and they follow dutifully all the instructions which they received in the council in heaven. Must there also be 7 righteous generations in the end of days before the city of Enoch of old can meet the holy city of our day? For it is known that when such righteousness is found among the people at the end of days, that a city of holiness will emerge in the perfection of beauty. And this is why Enoch could exclaim that Elda was brought by Motsah the Lamb into the temporal world to dwell with man. And the great Holy One Anokeesed followed with man, together with his heaven, patiently awaiting the day when he could take them back to Elda. And even now, he is expectantly waiting for his righteous people to prepare themselves to come home like a husband waits for his bride. And the city of holiness can only come by the gift and power of Motsah the Lamb. And as it was then, so it is in the same likeness now. For he is the lovely shepherd of all who dwell in a city of holiness. And thus it behooves all the righteous everywhere to give diligent heed to all of the righteousness in this book of remembrance, for in it are the instructions that will lead you back to Eden. Amen. And it came to pass that Enoch determined with a sure determination that his generation would not pass away without firmly establishing an understanding of the righteousness of Yod, and a sure dwelling place for those who would follow after the ancient righteousness of his old parents. But Enoch was perplexed in the determination of his heart to reprimand the Darkar Darchoi, for he could not say who they were. And the Lord said, when the colts of the reeds appear again for the 7th time, you must come up to me upon the eastern waste places of Mount Mahuya, and there I will instruct you concerning all of the sons of heaven. And more shall be written hereafter concerning all that transpired with Enoch in the camp of Yatsekawd, for he walked there many days with the Lord, and great and marvelous were the things the Lord did for him there. And it came to pass that Enoch returned home, and again he rehearsed all that had happened to him in the cave of the eastern hill country to all the people of Anokeesed, and word began to be spread abroad of the wonders that he had seen. Now it was the custom in that day that all of the people of the family of Mahuya would gather up their possessions early in the spring when the colts of the reeds appeared, and they would go to be with the people of Anokeesed. And every year the people had to establish new trails and pathways for their protection, by reason that the old ones may become known to the wicked, and each fall every family would go their way to what they called their winter camp. And the family of Mahuya would retreat eastward into the high country, and there they would dwell among the cavities in the rocks. And close by flowed pure waters that went down into the grasslands of Enoch. And they called their winter camp Shelevah, reference number 117, Strong's number 7963, and also number 7961. For it was a place of safety and tranquility, and in the encampment of Shelevah there was provisions in abundance, and much of it carried over to the next year and was put by. And near their winter camp was a high place, and there was a large stone on the top of it, with an overhang on the west side. And the people used this high place as a place of prayer, morning and night. And also they could espy out the land there from atop the rock. And all the far reaches of Enoch could be seen from there, and they could stay dry under the overhang, and it was a favorite place for Baraka to resort to. For most people went atop the stone, making the cavity under the overhang a private place for her, and it faced west. And it came to pass that one day Baraka came home distraught because of what she had seen from the high place, and she said that there was a glow in the sky to the north and west from where they were. And she said that the Lord had told her that the wicked of the land of Tawah were seeking vengeance against all those who had departed away from them to find safety and refuge in the land of Enoch. And they had set fire to the great grasslands, and we know the sisters of Enoch were such ones who had escaped them. And when Enoch heard it, he was stirred, and he got himself upon the stone at the high place, and he was with his mother, and he was filled with the spirit of Anokeesed. And it came to pass that they beheld together the glow in the evening sky, and he hastened himself to depart home, to put by small provision for a journey. And his mother said, "My son, where are you going?" And he said, "I must hasten myself to Anokeesed." And she was troubled in her spirit, and she said, "There is no one there. Why would you go there, seeing the wicked intend to burn the place? For I fear the glow in the sky will enlarge itself to prevail with the northwesterly wind, and it will sweep through the land of Enoch, burning all in the path of it, as it has hitherto done." And Enoch kissed his mother, and he said, "Mother, the Lord Kahee constrains me to hasten myself hither." And he departed in the darkness of evening, and Baraka had a foreboding, but Mahuya was content. And she would have gone after him to plead with him to remain, but Mahuya said, "Let him go. He is a man now, and he walks with Anokeesed." And it came to pass that Baraka took her bedding, and she went to the overhang on the high place, and she said she would remain there to pray until she saw him returning home, for she knew of the violence of fire that could come from the wicked. And it came to pass that Enoch went swiftly on his journey, and he went as one who was pursued. But he did not know why, and he went with the determination that one moment must not be lost. And on his way he could see by the light of day that indeed the fires were advancing swiftly toward the encampment of Anokeesed, and he plunged into his mission as a man who goes with speed swiftly, and being led by the spirit of Anokeesed that was in him, he took no thought of any danger. And when he approached to enter Anokeesed, he hailed, and he said that there was no one there. And he sat himself down by the brook after calling out to catch his breath. And as he went to sit down, he was inquiring of the Lord as to why he felt so compelled to hasten himself into the danger of the pathway of the fire. And as he did so, he saw ripples upon the water. And when he looked about in the thick smoke, he beheld some people approaching upon the water in a craft. And they had covered themselves with wet animal skins to protect themselves from the heat of the fire. And they were fleeing for their lives upon the brook, and the hair was singed off the skins, and some were burnt brittle and black, and the back of their watercraft was burnt black and smoking. And Enoch leapt into the water and drew their craft toward the shore, and he pushed it with his staff from the back, and in it was a father and mother with their many children, and one of the oldest ones, a tall, thin lad, was in the front pushing the craft ahead with a pole. And he was also covered from the heat, and they all cried out in despair, for the fire was about to overtake them. And Enoch is in the water up to his waist, and he is telling them to get out of the craft, and he spoke with such authority that they obeyed him. And it came to pass that Enoch stepped forward toward the fire upstream, and he cried out to Anokeesed, and he is shouting to the wind to please come and have mercy upon the loved ones of the Lord. And as he did so, he raised his staff to command the Yaatsekawd in behalf of Motsah the lamb. And when he spoke thus, a mighty wind that was cold and damp with the mists of heaven descended right down upon the regions of Anokeesed, and it came directly down from above, and it blew out in every direction, and the smoke and heat were blown away. And the wind persisted and prevailed against the fire that surrounded the entire encampment. And the man and his wife were astonished beyond measure as they lay exhausted upon the ground. And they witnessed the wind blowing the smoke and heat and fire back until it became only smoldering cinders. And as swiftly as the fire came, it departed. And the encampment with the beleaguered inhabitants of it were spared by the loving hand of the Yaatsekawd and their father Anokeesed, and the wind diminished, but blew steadily down upon them until they were revived. And they marveled that they had to first shout for the tumult of the fire, and then they had to shout for the much sound of the wind. And they all were very unaccustomed to shouting, for fear of being rude before the Holy One of Heaven. And they all lay upon the ground and thanked Anokeesed for saving them. And it came to pass that the tall lad with the pole in front tended to all the members of his family by wiping away their tears and washing their faces. And he helped them to remove the burnt skins and clothing, and to all of their amazement, not one of them was injured by the fire. And after a while, the young lad fell down exhausted upon the ground from his much effort. And it came to pass that Enoch beheld him, and he had compassion on him, and he bent down, and he removed the covering off his face, and he put his hand upon his forehead to pray for him. And as he did so, and the covering was lifted from off his face, Enoch withdrew his hand quickly, for he had put his hand upon a maiden. And she smiled up at him, and she had auburn hair, and I knew it was Essene, and she was very tall and thin, but Enoch did not know who she was, and Enoch was very much embarrassed that he had acted so bold as to brazenly go over and put his hand upon a maiden that was not of his acquaintance. And it came to pass that he went off alone immediately, and he busied himself to seek out provisions for the people. And he entered a dwelling, and he dug into the earth there. And he brought up a large tight pot with a lid, and it appeared to him that it contained dried fish. And when Enoch returned with the food, he placed it down upon the ground for them to eat, and they all ate, and were very weary, and went to sleep. Now it came to pass that Baraka witnessed the fires from atop the high place, and she could see plainly that the fire would sweep through that quarter of Enoch, where Anokeesed was. And she could not distinguish the wind in the midst of the huge clouds of smoke, nor forecast what would happen to save Enoch. And she approached to call upon Anokeesed, being filled with alarm, for she knew Enoch was there. And she arose upon her feet to pray, and behold, before she could say anything to Anokeesed, the face of a maiden appeared before her eyes, and the face and the spirit of Anokeesed were so comforting to her soul that she left off from praying. And it came to pass that she hastened herself down to the camp, and she got Maween and 2 young men, and they set out for Anokeesed. And in the morning Enoch was awakened by the kiss of his mother. And all the pathways were burnt, but the area around Anokeesed was spared. And I beheld that the company who arrived were black from the ashes up to their waists. And I saw Baraka and Maween traveling. And when Baraka saw from a distance the oasis of Anokeesed in a burnt sea of grass, her heart leapt within her, and she came rejoicing. And after she awoke Enoch, she went to a place where she knew food was put by, and she prepared the morning meal, using the fire from the smoldering grasses. And she saw that the father of the family was wearing a bark covering, and she found his name to be Aliyah, reference number 118, Strong's Concordance number 452. For he was well acquainted with Anokeesed. And after they had eaten, Baraka sought out Enoch, but Maween said he had departed toward the south, for his much embarrassment at touching the maiden. And Enoch went to seek out whether there was any who had need in that quarter of the land, and all the land was burnt, and the ashes were in piles. So he was obliged to use the old pathways, and as he went south, the land came to be gentle, rolling hills. And the grass was in the valleys between, and all was burnt black as far as could be seen. And Enoch sought an encampment called Rapshalash, because it was established since ancient times. And when he came over a brow in the roll of the plain, he saw that the valley was green, and Rapshalash was spared. And when he arrived, all of the people greeted him with kindness, and they were collecting their possessions, preparing to leave. And as Enoch approached, he did so with quiet respect, and he sat himself down, and he kept his bark covering on. And pretty soon he took it off, and the child brought him something to eat. And Enoch said to the child, "How is it that this place was spared from the violence of the fire?" And the child said, "Our old father Edra, son of Yaatsekawd, is given by Anokeesed to command fire, so we were unafraid." And Enoch said, "Can you take me to him so that I may speak to him?" And in a small lair, far off to one side, with a door so low one had to crawl to enter, lived old Edra. And he lived alone, for his wife had passed away. And Enoch waited to be invited in, and he was respectful before Edra. And when he was asked to speak, he said, "Father, Anokeesed has asked me to divide among the watchers of heaven, and I have come to see you, for you are well acquainted with them. And I thought you may be able to help me with blessing the Holy One of heaven." And Edra said, "Tell me what Anokeesed is doing as he is passing by." And it came to pass that Enoch rehearsed to Edra his lineage. And he spoke of who his parents were, and he told him about his visit with Yaatsekawd, who was called Gabriel. And Edra exclaimed, "You must be the one inscribed by Anokeesed to act for him. I have heard of you." And Edra called out for his cloak to be brought, so he could put it upon the shoulders of Enoch. And when it was done, he asked Enoch to please continue. And Enoch saw that many of the elders of Rapshalash were gathered outside, because the cloak was brought, and a listener was at the side of the door. And Enoch rehearsed to Edra all that the Lord had shown him when he revealed his plans to him, that he was going to establish Yod. And it came to pass that after all was done according to their custom, Enoch slept with the cloak of Edra covering him. And Edra pondered all that he had heard for a good long while. And in the morning when Enoch awoke, Edra was talking with the elders of Rapshalash, and they had not slept during the night. And the elders approached Enoch respectfully, and they said, "Does your father know of a place to dwell that will suit the needs of this people near your winter camp? We ask this, for we desire to set our hand to assist in establishing Yod for all of the righteous, as the Lord has said. And we have been speaking one to another for some time now concerning the need to firmly establish the righteousness of our father Yaatsekawd and his rib. Perhaps we may be of some use to your father, who now is called Mahuya." And Edra continued, and he said, "We usually dwell here all the time, but now we must find another place, as the grasses shelter us from the winter winds." And it came to pass that after a while, the people decided to go all together to inquire of Mahuya as to the suitability of joining him in his winter camp. And the people had much provision, and the encampment proceeded toward the land where Enoch dwelt, and they traveled gently for the sake of the women and the children. And it came to pass that as they neared Shelevah, to be 2 days' journey away, Enoch sent word by some swift youths that the people were approaching with him, and Essene and all her family were there, and the runners were given gifts to give Edra and sent back out. And it came to pass that when they arrived, they were greeted with kindness, and all the people made ready for them to settle there for the winter, and the place was filled to overflowing. And Barakah said to Enoch, after all was quiet, "You must meet the maiden that came to Anokeesed, for she is the maiden of my vision upon the high place, and she came to you upon the water, as our mother Chavah prophesied at your birth." And Enoch said, "Mother, I cannot meet her, because I am much embarrassed that I openly went over and touched her to lay my hand upon her." And Barakah said, "She is to be your rib. And the matter is settled. I will tell her you thought she was a lad." when she and her mother come to eat with us this evening?" And Enoch was obedient before his mother. Now it came to pass that Edra and Mahuya and Aliyah and all the elders among the men and women of Shelevah conferred together at length during the winter months concerning how they may assist to bring about the desires of Motsah in establishing Yod. And Enoch was asked to rehearse many times all that the Lord asked of him. And Baraka wished again that listeners had been with him. Reference number 119. Very interesting relationship here in leadership. Enoch is not prominent. And all the people had words since his youth concerning all of the prophecies that came at his birth, and they all longed to see the fulfillment of the inheritance of Gabriel. And they all had a great desire to have Enoch come to the place where he could fulfill the desires of the Lord for him to reprimand the watchers, and they all agreed that the tender heart of Anokeesed was in danger of being hurt unless the effects of the wicked were subdued by the empowerment of the community of the righteous. And it came to pass that during these discussions they discovered that none of them knew which of the sons of heaven were falling into decay and did not attend the council. And all of them were unfamiliar with what had come to the wicked, since they spread themselves into the regions of Tawah and Helea. And in his wisdom, old Edra said, "We know how to cling to righteousness, and we are diligent to be led by Kahee. But do we know how to be diligent to avoid evil? We do not even know the names of any of the sons of heaven, unless we all know of these things together, and we all agree concerning them. Some one of us may inadvertently act in some manner that is similar to the wicked, and in this way bring uncleanness upon ourselves. For each among us worships and acts together with the sons of heaven in our own way, each according to how we feel and how we are led. And we need to be of one heart and mind in the matter, if we are to prevail to succeed in establishing Yod for the gentle heart of Anokeesed." And the daughters of Baraka, who had escaped from the land of Tawah, were in the midst of these discussions, and the eldest of them was called Shuba, reference number 120, Strong's number 7729, 7725, because she repented and returned to her mother, and the youngest was called Nakhi, reference number 121, Strong's number 5355, because she was taken to the land of Tawah against her will, and she would not participate in their evil. And Shuba said, "It is true that the tender heart of Anokeesed can be hurt, for I myself have done so. And my repentance was heavy upon me, for none of us knew the doings of the wicked, and I supposed it to be an adventure to discover the doings of those in Tawah. And I found that their world is very different than our own, and they love the sons of heaven, who give them power over their fellows, and they have great swellings in their possessions because of the teachings of the sons of heaven which they follow." And she continued, and she said, "My younger sister Nakhi was looked upon by the people of Tawah for her shyness and innocence, as if she was a frightened wild deer. And when word came to me that she was marked to be a mother to the Nephilim, I saw to it that we could flee, and I bribed a young man to let us remain behind at a well of water as we journeyed. And as we waited to see where we would go, a traveler told us that our parents were on their way to the encampment of Nod, and we departed in haste to go there, to escape with our lives. So it is expedient upon all of the godly people in the land to know how to avoid evil." And it came to pass that Shuba rehearsed all that had befallen them for the rest of that evening, and all those assembled looked upon such wickedness with abhorrence, and poor old Edra wept. And it came to pass that it was determined that a search of all the lands round about should be made, to see if they could discover those who knew of any of the righteousness that had been established since the beginning. And it came to pass that the heart of Enoch was moved, and he was determined that Yod for the righteous should be established. And the people asked of him that he inquire of the Lord as to how they may rightly divide between the sons of heaven, and they hoped that seeing with would bring them to be of one mind in all their doings and worship, and in their associations with the Watchers. This concludes the Book of Remembrance of Enoch, Chapter 8. Shalom.